As of March 9th, 2025, daylight savings time is in full effect where I live, and I really wish that it wasn't. Because in my opinion, daylight savings time is stupid! Mission accomplished. I came here just so I could yell the word stupid. Okay, let's go. My hands are so cold. And hopefully by the end of this video, if you don't already, you will think daylight savings time is stupid too. And speaking of this video, I've hidden this picture of a goat somewhere in the video. See if you can find it. Let me know if you do. I don't know where my shovel is. I wasn't anticipating this roadblock. Found it. So what's so stupid about daylight savings time? Let's meet the characters. We've got insects, governments, farmers, and candy companies. And let's be clear about something. We're not really saving any daylight with daylight savings time. We're just displacing it. The sun doesn't exactly care what it says on our clock, and you can't buy an extra hour of sunlight off of it. The sun just does its own thing. The time change that we just recently went through is all about getting an extra hour of daylight in the evenings, later into our daily routines. And why do evenings get all the love? Let's talk about a guy named George. But first, I'm hungry. George liked to play with bugs. George Hudson was a New Zealand-based entomologist, and while he made significant contributions in the field of insect study, his primary form of employment was as a postal clerk working for the New Zealand Post Office, and his entomology work was conducted in his spare time, thus making it appropriate to refer to him as somebody who liked to play with bugs. He collected insects and studied them, and most of his time that he had available for collecting insects was actually like at the end of the day after his day job. So he thought to himself, wouldn't it be nice if the sun seemed to set a little later in the day, leaving more evening sunlight for more time for collecting bugs? And I wish I was joking, but his was the first actual proposal for the modern daylight savings time arrangement we have today that was published and taken seriously. Now, his proposal didn't actually result in the implementation of daylight savings time. The whole thing didn't really catch on until other people had the idea independently a little later on, and frankly, they had better reasoning than collecting bugs after work. But the whole idea stayed in this like yes and no state for a little while. The main catalyst that got it signed into law was war. Governments position daylight savings time as a way to save on fuel and energy costs during wartime, starting in World War I and getting a more serious look in World War II. And it was initially called war time rather than daylight savings time. Whoa, hold on a sec. What is that? Like, what is going on here? Anyway, back to what we were doing. The idea was that if the sun set later into the day, people would be turning on their lights and heat later into the day and using less energy overall. Now, while this idea seemed pretty good at the time, fast forward to today and there's really no evidence that suggests that it works at all anymore. Society and technology have really left that idea in the dust. But after it was implemented, other justifications just started getting piled on top of it. Like, if the sun sets later into your daily routine, people are more likely to be out longer, doing more things, and spending more money to help the economy. What about the farmers? Or if it seems brighter for longer in the evenings, maybe there'll be less crime. But to me, that just hinges around the idea that criminals have a strict bedtime that they stick to. But what about the farmers? Okay, what about the farmers? Wasn't daylight savings time created for farmers? I thought that farmers wanted it. No, actually, farmers tend to hate it. Now, I knew that. I was just trying to segue into that point. See, historically, farmers have been some of the most vocal opponents of daylight savings time because, surprise, surprise, a lot of farm work revolves around what the sun is doing, not what the clock says. And so no, daylight savings time was not created for farmers, and typically they don't like it. And now let's talk about some other drawbacks of daylight savings time. First of all, it can cause a lot of health and safety problems. Like immediately following the switch to daylight savings time every year, there is a marked increase in the number of heart attacks, car crashes, and other problems like that. Not to mention that it's just generally confusing. There are a lot of reports of missed appointments and people starting late for things. And did I mention that 2/3 of the world doesn't do it? Which kind of proves it's not necessary. Now there's one more point that I want to make, just to really highlight the absurdity of the whole thing. And this one has to do with the annual start and end dates of daylight savings time. And I specifically want to focus on the end dates. Now this changed about 20 years ago. The rule used to be that daylight savings time would end on the very last Sunday of October, meaning that whatever came after that within October would have less evening sunlight. But in 2005, the rule was changed so that now daylight savings time ends on the first Sunday of November instead, meaning that October gets to keep all of its evening sunlight. Now, there were a lot of people involved in this decision, but the loudest voice in the conversation came from candy companies. They wanted this for decades, and the reason they wanted this was Halloween. See, more evening sunlight on Halloween means better trick-or-treating turnout, which means more candy collected, which means more candy needs to be purchased, and Halloween represents one of the biggest days for candy sales. And I again wish that I was joking, but this is serious. Candy makers actually were so desperate for this change to happen that to get attention from government policymakers, they actually put candy-filled pumpkins on the seats of every senator in America. And if that isn't enough to convince you that daylight savings time is stupid, then I don't think anything is. That's all I had for this video. Thanks for watching.